Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the minigame podcast for Wednesday, April 30th. We'll spend about an hour doing some warm-up and then we'll jump into the video game news. So I talked about in the last stream, as I scroll down the 24-hour peak concurrent charts here from SteamDB, looking at what people or bots are playing. Bots. I assume we're about half of the people playing Counter-Strike 2, and I guess I really don't want to give bots personhood, but yeah, that's the word I used in that case. It's been kind of a nightmare scenario for the past 48 hours. I was trying to work on redoing my macros that open up all the video game news tabs for me to talk about, which in the long run should save me a whole bunch of effort and time. But frankly, since this is about the fourth or fifth time I've had to rewrite the code or tweak the code, it's feeling like there's actually a lot of work being put in here to save what could be a lot of work in the longer view, but may never actually pay off, because it may just be the case that these macros are just constantly breaking. So yeah, I was in a little bit of that regular expressions hell that I talked about in the last stream, in that there was some regular expressions, but I, after 3 or 4 hours, got out of that, and then I was making a decent amount of progress. And at one point I realized that I was really doing everything kind of backwards. I saw a review for this game, Schedule 1. Doesn't look like it's anything that actually would interest me. And it does, to me, feel like a game that could potentially be either, on one hand, the best drug simulating game, drug dealer simulator game available with some silliness to it. Or, on the other hand, it could become the next Yandere simulator type game that is a little bit edgelord, a little bit niche, although drugs these days, perhaps not that niche, but mostly like Yandere simulator, in that there may just be a whole bunch of enthusiasm from it in its initial launchings and a whole bunch of ambition, but then it may just drag on forever and ever, adding extremely minimal amounts of content. I have no reason to have anything other than a slight fear that that's going to be the case, but yeah, there is a danger certainly for anything that's not going to likely ever get a publisher or get funding or sell enough that it would justify hiring other people. Although the Yandere simulator example, which I kind of wish there was a better example, is almost unique in itself, in that if the creator of Yandere simulator at any point had simply worked well with others, then the game would be almost certainly finished by now. And yeah, at some point, the direct contrast to the Yandere simulator might be something like Minecraft, where there you have Notch, who also really couldn't handle the popularity and working well with others, but instead of just having Minecraft be his pet project that he would just constantly add code to in a very slow process, he eventually just sold it to Microsoft. And frankly, even in that example, that's not a one-to-one comparison, because Mojang as a company existed before Microsoft bought them out, so Notch was already working well with others. Which, yeah, pretty much any game that's not just going to be a in and out, one and done experience, something that you really are going to just continuously add content to, which is what I believe Schedule 1 is planning on doing, is going to lead to a scenario where you are constantly well, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, it's going to constantly have that feeling of not being 100% finished until it is finished. And more importantly, what I was going to actually say was anything that you want to constantly add content to is going to require people working on it in a group of people, and the collaborative effort that is required for most video game development. Sure, a single person can probably make something like a low effort idle clicker like Banana, and a really good programmer might even make something like Repo, but then adding new levels and stuff like that is going to really start draining you as a single programmer. I saw a little bit of coverage of Claire Obscura Expedition 33. It is a turn-based RPG game, and that's about all new. The only new information I really have for the game, and that's probably all I will have as far as new information for the game. So yeah. Anyways, so I spent the past 2 days just trying to program my macros once again, starting over, and losing all of yesterday's work. So, and that has once again shifted my sleep schedule, so that's why I'm streaming perhaps a little bit earlier than what the algorithm seems to like me to stream at. But yeah, it was a big loss with the Windows file history of Windows 10 not working. It apparently has decided to stop making backup copies on the hour, even though it's totally programmed to do that. So I just need a much better, much more cautious, much more paranoid system to back up things. And yeah, at a certain point, these UI Vision codes really are just going to need to be hand copied to a GitHub repository just to make backups on the hour, if less than that. And certainly that may be the next generation of IDEs, integrated development environments. In particular, is that there just needs to be this constant copy on write style of archiving, GitHub style of archiving things, that every single time you change something, it should be undoable. But yeah, having lost my code the first day and just in the process of kind of recreating the code, I started to realize what I've been doing is kind of backwards from what needs to be done, in that you have links here on a page, for example, and these links say like NBA 2K 2025. Well, I have been just collecting the links for use later to then come back and click on the links, which is how a human would do it. Certainly, as you look at the link, you decide you want to click on that link, you click on it. But there's actually no reason to do it that way at all. What I should have been doing, or at least now the new way I'm programming it, which I think is more efficient, is to just take the URLs, the hrefs in the HTML of the links, and just save that. And just say, hey, I have the URL of a web page. When I later decide to start opening a bunch of web pages, I will just use that URL to open a new tab automatically. Inherently, what this does is this gets away from that manifest version 3 problem with UI Vision, where I am constantly running into trouble trying to connect and switch to tabs, which a lot of that I think actually came down to just bad regular expressions when trying to find the tabs, using 2 asterisks instead of just 1, or having a forward slash at the end when you didn't need a forward slash, or not having a forward slash at the end when you did need a forward slash. So I kind of maybe fixed that problem, although only time will really tell. So theoretically, if I can get this new code working, at least I won't be running into the same problems I was doing before. Although it is worth pointing out that there's a high chance that that's not going to be the case, and it still will have troubles finding tabs. So what this is going to inherently do is remove a bunch of steps, try to speed up the whole process. I'm also trying to reduce the amount of RAM used by not having an array and then defining a new array to add one thing to the end of the array, or defining a new array when you remove one thing. The push and pop features in JavaScript effectively means you're doing a lot of memory copying of one array to another array and then renaming it, where I can use just a pointer or an index number, whatever you want to call it, to go through an array once it's built, instead of shrinking the array back down to being small. Excuse me. So my hope is in doing that that would create less crashing and, yes, less memory usage. So yeah, inherently with this new system, each of my interstitial web pages, the screens that just describe what I'm about to look at, will be the tabs that I will switch to, and then I will open a new tab to the right of those tabs automatically, just using URL and code instead of clicking on things, which means that I control the URLs of what tabs I'm switching to, and more importantly, it will work, hopefully, and fix the problem of Firefox putting tabs to sleep, because what it's going to do is it's going to automatically open a page and then immediately go to that page and collect all the links on that page, not giving Firefox enough time to decide this tab is taking up too much RAM and putting it to sleep. Then it's just going to close that page. And where it opens that page doesn't really matter. All that really matters is that it opens the page somewhere and it closes that same page somewhere. It doesn't accidentally close some other pages, which is always a danger. And so tabs going to sleep, not going to be a problem theoretically in the future. Everything should just be more efficient by maybe only 15%, maybe as much as 60%. But yeah, every little bit is going to help. The problem, though, is getting it to actually work, which is the majority of probably the last 6+ hours that I've spent is just debugging and trying to get it to actually work, and then having occasional things pop up, and then trying to figure out what I changed to make those occasional things pop up, or things are popping up for some weird reason. Some of the code I'm doing is definitely just making sure to not act unless it's going to act successfully, to reduce the number of errors that pop up in the lists, in the log. And so there's perhaps more if commands than one might like, but then that will just in the long run, I think, have a better scenario, because I don't want to have to scroll through a whole bunch of errors. I want it to run perfectly and have no errors at all. But yeah, and all of this JavaScript code, and that is basically what UI Vision is not particularly very good. It's not very efficient, it's not very fast. JavaScript never has been particularly fast. It is a early generation of interpreted languages, in that it is being run on the fly and not compiled into assembly language or machine code, and no optimization is really being applied to it or anything like that. Whereas most code, you would want to have it be compiled, although it is certainly interesting that you can run like Godot programs very quickly and you don't have to sit there and wait for it to compile, which is something you did have to do with most compilers and IDEs, is to sit there and wait for it to compile just to see it run, just to find that there's one bug that doesn't really work great, that crashes the whole thing and doesn't let you test too many other things. But yeah, again, I think it is probably time for an HTML 6 or 7, whatever would be the newest HTML. And with that, there probably is room to put in much more of an interactive programming language into it, instead of just living with JavaScript forever. Even though JavaScript has evolved a little bit, I think it's probably time to just move on to something completely different. And yeah, overall the idea of JavaScript and HTML is probably time to evolve that quite a bit. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I really have to say as far as warm-up, is that I've spent the past 2 days in debugging hell with a little bit of regex hell, but certainly you can see how I'm describing this as hell. It's probably just, it's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to work on the YouTube shorts completely and get that going, the new code there, and I want to get back to doing the commentary run on Blackwell Deception, which inherently I need to finish Blackwell Deception, then kind of burn fairly quickly through the final Blackwell game, and then I need to play the Talos Principle 2, because I've installed the Talos Principle 2 on my C drive and it is taking up a whopping 77 gigs. So I really only on my C drive have a fairly old 256 NVMe, which is dangerously close to being full at this point. So there is room for improvement there. Meanwhile, I'm not accomplishing much of anything else as far as cleaning and decluttering and remodeling my house. And yeah, that certainly sucks too. But yeah. Also, we're in April and it feels like, for me, we're just entering a summer time, but it's also extremely rainy, so I don't know what season I'm supposed to be expecting versus what season I'm actually going to end up getting there. But yeah, slightly hotter and rainier does continue to run into the issue of humidity, which, yeah, that's annoying too. Yeah, right now it is apparently 63% humid in my house, and I have the fan going, I guess, right now to try and reduce that, but it's really not the fan that would reduce humidity, it would be the air conditioner. And so yeah, it's already a little chilly in my house. So yeah, I think it is time to turn on my dehumidifier in a different room, because yeah, the air conditioner I have just doesn't seem capable of actually reducing the humidity to the level I want. Alright, so with that, I don't think I have really too much else to say as far as warm-ups go. Why is this way over here? What the heck just happened here? What am I even looking at? Did I minimize a window? Did I close a window? I feel like I may have just minimized the window there. Let's see what happened. Either I just accidentally closed the window with a gesture, which shouldn't be possible, or yeah. Okay, so that apparently is the window. What the heck just happened then? History. Recently closed windows. Recently closed tabs. I am confused. What the heck just happened there? See, I have a whole list of games here. Oh, they're just in the wrong place, aren't they? Alright, well. So apparently I closed a tab as I was expected to do. And there's just a ton of games from Steam on the left. And I don't even know why that would be the case, since I manually opened all of these tabs anyways, but doing the whole right click opening tabs here, maybe that created some weirdness. There is a new thing, new cards, new expansion, new special event with a couple things new to do with Pokemon TCG Pocket. So I'm able to put a little bit more attention into that. I'm still playing Memento Mori, and there's a new character and a new event there. They really do like to put all the events right at the first of the month, or just about at the first of the month. And if anything, the one game of the 3 games I'm playing, Madoka Magica, is the one that actually has the least amount of new content. And like, they just launched an English website for their game, so it really does just feel like they rushed this game out. And I'm not 100% sure why, because it definitely feels like, to me also, it's going to just fizzle out as far as content goes. Again, I'm at level 83 of level 120, and so unless there's some trick there, once you get to the max level, where you start over and do it a second time or something like that, it does just feel like I'm going to be not only within the top 200 players or so of the whole game, but just at this maxed out level, getting more and more resources because I'm at a maxed out level than low level new players, which will just constantly put me further and further ahead, because I don't think the game really is that balanced, although there really is only one player versus player section. But yeah, the player versus player section is kind of going to be it too, because once you do all of the single player content, once you get to level 120, then you're only really getting resources, or trying to get resources, to upgrade your top 5 characters that you play to play against other players. And that's kind of it. Yeah. And weirdly, it does definitely feel like I'll max out Madoka Magica in like 3 or 4 months, and then just keep it around to look at the story. Although in fairness, I kept the game that I sung the praises of and said was my favorite mobile game. And I still think it probably is my favorite mobile game, which was Destiny Child before it was shut down. I still have like the memorial version of that game, where I could go back and read a lot of text that I didn't read, as far as the massive number of characters. It was like at least 300 characters that I collected, and probably closer to 600 or 900 that were available. But yeah, I never have gone back and actually tried to read any of that content or look at any of the story. And yeah, the memorial version of Destiny Child has no gameplay in it, really, at all. I don't think it has any gameplay at all. Let's see. We are on April 30th, so things like the charts will all update in the next time. Another thing about rewriting this code to work in a different way, in a more direct way, means that I no longer would really need to use a extra extension to have tabs open when I click on them automatically, which anytime I can reduce the number of extensions in a web page will reduce the amount of RAM every single tab uses, because effectively each extension is a bit of extra code being injected into every single tab, which when you have hundreds of tabs, that's adds up, certainly. Yeah, I don't know if I really need it for any other casual browsing, because inherently on Firefox, if you click on a link and it's going to take you to a page on a different domain. So I'm on mobygames.com right now looking at this. If one of these links took me to store Steam, for instance, then it would always open a new tab based on the settings I have. So that's just built into Firefox. So it'd really only be a case of when I needed new tabs to open up for some other reason. And inherently, if I just learn to adjust my expectations a little bit, even if it didn't work that way, it'd probably be fine. Particularly, it would be a case where like Gemetsu articles would have a Steam link, and then when I am streaming, if I clicked on the Steam link instead of having my macros do it, then it would potentially automatically just go to the Steam page and not leave the previous tab open to close later, because certainly I do a lot of that too, and that's what those kinds of actions drag out this whole experience, is when I'm just moving back and forth between tabs to close them. So anything that saves me even a few seconds. I will have to admit though, I kind of am not feeling great about my current focus or output as far as a video game content creator, in that there's just a lot of work right now I'm putting into being a video game news journalist, which is not even something I really want to be, or being a programmer, which yeah, at some point, if I had a great patron that would pay me to be a programmer, I probably should just be a programmer. But I'd inherently have to be some kind of, more realistically, some kind of independent contractor who would take on contracts and then struggle to finish them on time or in a good manner. What I really missed out with is being like some intern or junior programmer, somebody that could get more into the habit of it, or they could be surrounded by a group of supportive other programmers who could speak on that same level, and there would be more of a collaborative effort. But yeah, I don't know what the world really would be like, is going to be like even in the next day, let alone in the near future. But it does feel like you've got basically maybe a couple more days in which you can buy things that have already come into the United States, as far as particularly electronics, before you're going to start to see fairly large imports and tariffs being applied to things. And inherently, I guess part of that also is that you might very well order something and it be shipped by the US Post Office, and then you get a note in your mailbox saying you have to come to the US Post Office and pay a tariff on this, which is not something that most people in the United States have ever had to deal with or even know is a thing. Whereas if it's shipped by FedEx or UPS, you may also just get an extra bill before they're willing to deliver it, or you might get lucky and FedEx and UPS might cover some of that tariff for you, but I bet they don't. Apparently 20 years ago, in a couple of days, was the point where Valve settled the differences in a lawsuit with Vivendi over distribution via Steam, the ownership of Half-Life IP, and the right to grant license agreements for Valve's games to cybercafes. Vivendi Universal ceased distribution of the retail package version of Valve's game effectively August 31st, 2005. Additionally, only Valve's licenses for cybercafes became valid. I wonder if Vivendi Universal still might have some kind of weird claim they could make around Half-Life in particular. Wouldn't that be weird if that was the real reason we don't see a Half-Life 3? Although that wouldn't make a lot of sense, in that we did see a Half-Life Alyx. But yeah, maybe Vivendi has some claim to something specifically called Half-Life 3. Now, weirdly, I don't know if Vivendi Universal Games was ever a good force for video games at all. Because I'm pretty sure Vivendi is also the one that drug down Ubisoft into its current state, which is still fairly strong but not as good as it should be, and its production certainly is not varied enough or good enough in my opinion. And if I'm not completely confusing Vivendi for Viacom, Vivendi may also be just the company that, yeah, it may actually have been Viacom, come to think of it, that was the drug down Ubisoft to its current state, which is still not a terrible state. And at a certain point, you can't really blame Ubisoft's current state as much for by Viacom or Vivendi as much as you can blame it on just the current leadership and the current employee's interaction. Educational games. ARM had a long history dating back to the 1980s. Pioneers Davidson and Associates. Yeah, Vivendi is not even the company I'm thinking of, I think. Vivendi Universal merged with Activision to become Activision Blizzard. So that is the current company. So old enemies with new banners, effectively, and the Activision Blizzard is now owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft and Valve always have that air of being bitter rivals. And if we look over what games they've made, Fear Files I think was a spin-off of Fear Gold Edition maybe. That doesn't really look like a particularly long list of great games. These are the most recent games. So if we went to the full list, Spyro. Yeah, these are not games that are knocking my socks off. Fear, at one point, would have knocked people's socks off, but they really didn't stick with Fear as a series anywhere as much as they should have. And yeah, here comes the yawning. I did something fairly stupid today in the experiment and decided to cook and eat a whole pizza as my main meal for the day before streaming. Which, yeah, that's probably way too many carbs. Yeah. Barbie games. Use Your Suit Larry game. Wasn't really expecting that. It may very well be that they were more of the publisher of some of these games. Lost Vikings games. So yeah, not a long list there. And what's going on with my chart? Did it decide to load that way? I don't know. But yeah, the chart also today, although I went in and fixed it, so it's back to being appropriate. Although it's kind of hard to tell. If you tilt your head, this one looks like it might be taller than this, but when you actually look at the total numbers, 7691 versus 7643, then this is taller as far as the total number of points. Although there is something interesting to be seen here in that Black Myth Wukong and GTA 5 have color bands that are much lower, which implies to me that these were much more popular games. Firefox just completely crashed, and I've never even seen this before. Yeah. So I probably should stop updating Firefox at this point. Yeah, I'm noticing an instability in perhaps some of the settings I've set. I'm noticing instability in perhaps some of what I've done. Now, fortunately, I just hit restart Firefox and it reset everything. But yeah, it would have been a very short show if that crashed and I actually lost progress. I don't know what I could really even do at that point. I guess I'd have to start over from scratch, which would be too hard, but it would be annoying. And it would turn a potentially 3-hour show into a 5-hour show if I did things the wrong way. So yeah, my thought here is that GTA 5 and Black Myth Wukong is fairly low these days. Black Myth Wukong in particular, when I'm sampling it, it's getting like 45 points, which means it's in the 45th spot of the top 100. Whereas Counter-Strike 2 is still very strongly getting 100 points in the first spot. And so we're beginning to start to see a pattern that's easy to recognize with this black bar of these games losing their relevancy, which makes some sense. Certainly Black Myth Wukong being just a game that if you played it, you've probably experienced all there is to experience. And while there probably is always something more you can do in GTA 5, playing GTA 5 right now is less likely to be enjoyable when GTA 6 is around the corner. So there is definitely a chance that we'll see Rainbow Six Siege finally surpass these two games. And yeah, over the long haul, this will still give us some information. Elden Ring, kind of in that same situation where it's probably been played out a little bit. But yeah, newest game really to be on this list is still Banana. It's still fairly high. Or maybe Baldur's Gate 3 came out after Banana. And yeah, that chart actually doesn't even have today's date, today's information in it, so yeah, I didn't play any games, so it's kind of pointless to show off my personal chart there. Weirdly, this Angel Legion is still very much dominating the top spot here on Steam, on top of Oblivion Remastered and Expedition 33. Rusty Lake Anniversary Sale might not be the worst thought as far as the sale goes. I don't think any of these curve games would interest me though. Let's see, yeah, if I don't have the extension specifically on, I would do a lot more right clicking to open a new tab on this page in particular. Yeah, but that may be literally the only page in which I really do that. So I've made a decision, because of the tariff situation, that if I can see a refurb, even if it is just a 64 gig version of a Steam Deck, I may get, frankly, 2 of them if they're the 64 gig versions, and maybe even 2 of them of a refurb of a cheaper version, because I am just betting hard here that the next 4 years are going to be really tough as far as getting new hardware that would be much better. Like, you may very well see sales of current hardware that's already been shipped into the US, but I just don't expect there to be a Switch 3 or a Steam Deck 2 coming in the next 4 years at this rate. we may very well see a slowdown of development and announcement of new hardware to a certain extent. Yeah, I definitely see the worst case scenarios. I'm gonna find out that I'm totally wrong, and then end up spending a lot of money now. Well, no, that's not even the worst case scenario. The real worst case scenario is you spend a lot of money now panic buying things like Steam Decks, and then you starve to death as the sessions hit. Guess that would technically be the worst case scenario, or at least one of them. I may need to go into my content, my login, and just start to disallow anything that even has slight lewd content, because it is really getting to the front page a little bit more these days. And yeah, there is a problem that when I was testing one of the curation parts of my macros that I'm programming, is that there definitely are some games that from the screenshots don't seem like they have adult content in them, but then are still tagged to have adult content in them. And so weirdly, in that case, the curations is doing what I told it to do, which is to just go ahead and close that tabs and not show them, just for YouTube family friendliness reasons. But it is not able to put a human judgment on the actual screenshots or the actual descriptions, which is really what I would prefer to have happen. But that takes an actual human looking at the pages before I stream, which is then too much work. Alright, well, I'm going to take just a brief break here before we go any further, and I probably will end up taking several of them, but yeah, it'll just be a few minutes, so I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, but I don't know really how for how long. Frankly, anybody that watches my content and puts up with me is a nominee for sainthood. Frankly, it's just crazy, frankly, to inconsistently have schedules and times to have to go to the bathroom so often as I do, to be tired, yawning, coughing anywhere as much as I do. All of that really just highlights to me how I'm a different kind of content creator, and by different I mean bad at a certain level, that I just don't have the physical and mental ability to stick with it. And certainly that's something I definitely recognized with the high demands of being a Twitch streamer, which really, that is just insane for, I think, anybody to really force anyone who wants to be successful to A, probably be a girl and hot tub stream, or B, be the elite 0.1% of gamers who can stream for 7 to 9 hours a day every day and make something interesting while doing that. But yeah, YouTube's not much better, but at the very least, in my pre-recorded functions, I can avoid a lot of the disruptions to a big percentage, in that I can make 22 minutes to an hour long, 44-minute episodes, and as such, I'm less likely to really need to pause the video in a pre-recorded video. Although I've gotten kind of bad about doing that also. And yeah, most content creators doing pre-recorded just silently edit all of that out, and I've just never been deceptive enough, for what little deception that really is, to agree with that and want to not admit something. These games have intrigued me as far as the Rusty Lake series of things, but I don't feel like I've ever been able to really figure out what the right order is for them as far as what you play them in, and honestly I'm not sure it really even matters what order you play them in. Yeah, here we have one that we can add just to the library instead of even bothering to put it on the file list. But yeah, in part of losing my progress, I briefly lost my checkboxes that I added, which at the moment I can't really do anything with the checkboxes. So the effort there is something that will be useful in the future, hopefully. But yeah, I don't know useful in the future really at all as far as whether that's a legitimate claim anymore. I'm certainly old enough, and basically anybody's old enough at this point to assume that they might not live that much longer. You know, once you get past your 20s and 30s, once you get past your teens, I guess is what I really mean to say, you start to really think about that, and I can't help but wonder if a lot of my ambitious things, as far as like a home lab and a server, which I've not been able to make any progress on in 10 years, are just going to be failed ambitious projects that never go anywhere. And that expands to even further things, like just getting back to watching anime, or yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not best not to think about it, but my desire had always been to hopefully be able to retire early in a way in which I would just have a lot of energy and a lot of time on my hands. And maybe I have a lot of time, but I don't have a lot of energy, and certainly I'm not healthy enough to feel invigorated. And yeah, some of it too is just I'm overwhelmed with life, overwhelmed with everything, like everybody else. So yeah, my decision here is, I guess ideally if there was two 64GB Steam Deck LCD versions in refurbished state, I would buy that. Going really cheap there, inherently, that's slightly over $550 for buying two of them. Really don't think I can afford to buy two 512 OLEDs. It certainly would be nice if maybe there was a way to get a 256 OLED version, but I don't think Valve is going to come out with one of those, although they might. We might start to see just like cheaper products that are lacking only a little bit in the specs. But more realistically, I think you're going to start to see products at the same price, if not more expensive, that are just lacking components internally that are spec'd up. But yeah, basically I guess the 64 gigabyte or a really good deal on the 256. I guess it isn't too much of a difference to go with a 256 LED refurb. In fact, it's probably not even much of a difference to go with a 512, although I don't know if a 512 was really necessary. But yeah, I'm thinking going cheap. And certainly some of that is just in contrast to, I don't think the Switch 2 is going to come into the United States without major tariffs on top of its prices. And so people are going to think that they're going to buy a Switch 2 for like $450, and then they're going to realize actually they're paying closer to $800 for it. And so I think a lot of people are going to just say no to that completely. And the contrast to that would be, now is really the time to, I wouldn't really recommend getting an Xbox, but maybe getting a PS5 cheap might make some sense. Or getting a Switch 1 makes some sense. Sorry, I'm distracted here. Yeah, PS5 makes sense. Cheap PC makes sense. Even a MacBook type device. Probably not a MacBook, but maybe a Mac machine. I don't even know really when it comes to gaming if any MacBook or Mac machine really comes anywhere close to being useful. But yeah, there are a few, there is a percentage, it's not particularly great, that there's a percentage of Steam games that are playable on the homebrew, not the homebrew channel, on Mac OS. But yeah, I definitely think parents should be thinking of alternatives for their kids for this Christmas. And at some point, you probably are going to just run into a situation where a lot of parents are telling their kids that they've been bad and they're getting nothing for Christmas, even if they haven't been that bad, just because there's no money. So I wanted to show the homebrew channel here. I think made something for the homebrew channel for the Wii, and put the homebrew channel on my Wii a long time ago. I don't know how many people actually were still using the homebrew channel though, considering how old a Wii would be. So yeah, I believe I used the Twilight hack in particular to install it. But the thing I had heard was that the homebrew channel has been taken down, although it doesn't seem like their website has been updated to show that, because apparently there was some stolen code in it directly from Nintendo, which apparently they knew about for the longest time, and maybe they were just waiting until the statute of limitations passed it, or they're just waiting until it was no longer relevant. But yeah, didn't really do too much what the homebrew channel. I was hoping that there would be some more pictures here, what it looked like, because I wasn't really trying to run ROMs on it or anything like that. So I installed like Doom Launcher on it, and that was kind of it that I remember. Maybe some of these free open source things. Yeah. I don't recognize really any of these at all, so these may very well predate me as far as, or post-date me as far as things that were on the homebrew channel. And I don't even remember the homebrew channel looking like this, so I might have on my Wii, assuming my Wii even still worked in the garage, I may very well have a very, very early homebrew channel Wii, which maybe makes it a little bit somewhat valuable now, in the same way that I have a PlayStation 3 that I think still has PT on it, and so there's a level of value on that too, I believe, as far as just rarity. As far as Steam Deck goes, though, you can still see people are playing the big games, seemingly with no complaints. It would be interesting. I don't really anticipate it happening, but it would have been interesting if there was an alternate story where the worm turned and people just started saying, hey, I got a Steam Deck, but I'm not really using it, which in my case is true because I don't really get anything done. Which, yeah, me saying I'm going to buy more Steam Decks is really meaning I'm buying Christmas gifts for people, if I'm going to do that, which is probably a mistake. But yeah, I could see other people saying, hey, I'm not using it, or hey, this games are just not playable at all, and there are no good games to play on the Steam Deck, which I don't think that's really the case. And that has a major factor to do with the high amount of effort that Valve has put into compatibility and improved compatibility through the Proton interface, Proton code. A lot of people playing Infinity Nikki, even though it's still like way too greedy is from what I saw on reviews. And a lot of people going back to playing. Interesting, this is Oblivion Game of Year edition, but up here we have just the Oblivion Remastered edition. So people who didn't feel the desire, or perhaps had some other reason, have started playing on their Steam Deck the older edition of Oblivion, the non-remastered version of Oblivion. Which, in fairness, DF Retro did say that the remastered edition ran terribly. So, might be something to that. Death Must Die is certainly an interesting name. I suppose it is an interesting question as far as just what game would shock me the most if I did see it being played on Steam Deck, in the top 100 charts in particular. Well, certainly something like a visual novel being in the top 100 would be surprising, or an adult game would be surprising too, but I bet they wouldn't even show up on the list. I bet Valve would just censor that. But yeah, something that sold itself on its graphics, particularly Hellblade as a series, for instance, would be fairly odd to be played on a Steam Deck. But then Last of Us Part 1, I guess, remastered or not. I'm not sure if this is the remastered version or the original version. That's a game that sells itself fairly highly on graphics. It's being played on the Steam Deck too. Monster Hunter Wilds sells itself on being an epically large game, and it's being played on the Steam Deck. So yeah, there really isn't a long list of games that don't feel like there's Part 2 remastered being played on a Steam Deck. Yeah, there really isn't a large list of games here that aren't playable or being played on a Steam Deck, as far as just like they are super focused around graphics, or they're super focused around inputting things like fighting games, for instance. I could see them not being played on the Steam Deck as much, but in general I could just see that fighting games not being played as much as at all. Okay, so then that's going to bring us to Video Games Chronicles, and again, videogameschronicle.com. I opened up everything manually here, so there may be more tabs than we really need to talk about. Borderlands 4 release date is getting moved forward. Borderlands will now release a week and a half earlier than expected. Randy Pitchford also had some updates and statements. The news was announced in a video posted on Twitter/X by Randy Pitchford shortly before he removed the video, saying it had gone up too early. Then the video is up. Which, yeah, this is by far perhaps the smallest screw up we've seen Randy Pitchford make as far as putting a video up too early, but perhaps still does highlight that he is perhaps too much of a screw up to be a CEO. At the very least, there perhaps should be some checks and balances as far as people signing off and double checking the dates and time zones. He also said that the fact of the game being moved up was not due to any specific game. So you can see from this video, it looks like Randy Pitchford is a little bit older, of course, maybe a little bit heavier, which happens when you get older. Feels like he's got fairly thick glasses on. Yeah. And I question whether this is the gearbox in Frisco, Texas, or whether this is the one in Vancouver, Canada, which I'm not sure if the Vancouver, Canada gearbox even exists anymore. He is a terrible actor for somebody who is also an amateur or semi-pro magician. Yeah. But yeah, he's just in this building, and in the background you can barely see anybody at all, and I wouldn't be surprised if nobody in Gearbox really wants to be anywhere near him. Yeah, if anything, this just feels like the PlayStation State of Play negotiated an earlier release date or something. So yeah, that video was slow and boring. And yeah, I'm still just kind of uncertain as far as where Borderlands 4 is really going to go. Haven't even played Borderlands 3. Shoot, did I even finish playing Borderlands the pre-sequel? I think I did. Yeah, I did. Wow. That was terrible as a game too, so yeah. I did, but I didn't do some of the DLC arena stuff. I just looked at it and was just totally uninterested in it. But yeah, Pandora gets destroyed. Pretty much all of the characters from the previous games are not going to play major roles, it seems like, in Borderlands 4, so it is weirdly feeling like it's going to be a soft reboot of the series, and very weirdly just be going in a very different direction from what Borderlands 1 and 2 was, and may just be more so of going in the bad directions of the pre-sequel in Borderlands 3. But yeah, Borderlands announcements and Borderlands announcements here as far as how this goes. And it's weird now that 2K owns Gearbox that 2K is perhaps not more interested in controlling the announcements of Borderlands as a series, and that they are involving Randy Pitchford at all. There was every opportunity in the world for Randy Pitchford to kind of retire or disappear into the shadows after the Borderlands movie came out as a big flop. He had already been pretty absent, it felt like, from the actual game development aspects of Gearbox anyways. But yeah, at this point he is CEO, but I don't think he even owns major shares in Gearbox, so at any point 2K could potentially replace him or promote him into a hidden office somewhere where nobody would see him again. Of course, Gearbox also is in that one-hit wonder range, in that they really don't have anything else that they have to announce or anything else they can really make that people would accept. Of course, perhaps that is a better situation to be in than Respawn Entertainment, where EA has just laid off hundreds of jobs as they have cut off and canceled 2 projects from Respawn. Up to 400 workers are said to have been laid off. One of these was reportedly a Titanfall project that maybe they were working on in an early state. Some of this was people working on Apex Legends and Star Wars Jedi. The fact that EA even has 400 people they can lay off says something, that maybe video game companies are getting too big and too bloated. On the other hand, this may just be yet another example of EA being one of the worst video game companies out there, and I imagine shrinking down the number of employees to still try and make the maximum amount of money off of EA sports games, which is pretty much all they tend to put out consistently, at least. A huge Nintendo Switch update adds game sharing, virtual cards, and more. Nintendo's latest firmware prepares for the Switch 2. So, one of the things about this firmware 20.0.0, I think also allows for a better system transfer process. So yeah, they are putting out the whole system here where you can move your data over. Yeah. System transfer to Nintendo Switch 2 has been added under system settings, system also. But in a weird way, that may also be the last major update you ever see for the Switch 1. And I don't believe I've ever seen any news reporting on any of the previous updates to the Switch. So the fact that they're at major version number 20 is kind of shocking to me. Yeah, Gearbox boss Randy Pitchford denies Borderlands 2 date changes due to GTA 6 or any game. Take-Two owns both Gearbox and Rockstar. So, yeah. I thought it was 2K that owns Gearbox. It is 2K because Take-Two owns 2K, which is confusing to say the least. At least I'm pretty sure that's the case. But yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if the reality is exactly what people are speculating, that Borderlands is being rushed out or is just capable of being released early, so they're going to release it early to get people to buy it and play it and have maybe 6 weeks of a launch window before GTA 6 maybe comes out, which inherently by moving it forward puts Gearbox even further away from the Christmas season, which would probably hurt the sales in the short run, maybe not in the long run. Speaking of hurting sales, 8BitDo has, amongst several other hardware manufacturers, just paused all shipments of hardware to the United States because of the tariffs. So now weirdly, I saw slick deals for an 8BitDo controller just a couple days ago. So it may very well be the case that sales start happening because objects are just going to want to be cleared off the shelves, because it makes a little bit less sense in a good old-fashioned brick and mortar company in particular, but even in a digital company like Amazon.com, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have one unit available for sale sitting on the shelf when you know you cannot refill or restock that unit. That's the whole idea of clearance, as far as where clearance gets its name. In reality, I think most things listed on clearance are just done as a sales gimmick, but the truest form of clearance would be, yes, we're clearing it off the shelves so that we can get something that we can actually restock. Now with these tariffs, maybe nothing can be restocked on the shelves overall, but who knows what'll happen there. So for consumers, if you have money and you're not too afraid to spend it, it might be the case that you see some sales for things like the 8BitDo controllers for a short time before they go out of stock, and then you just don't see them available at all, or they come back in several months at a much higher price, which that might also be the case, is to clear off your current inventory as a way of removing them from the shelves to bring them back at a much higher price without hoping people don't really notice that price has gone up quite a bit. But yeah, I do suspect with the tariffs also, you're just going to see people start to refuse to ship to the United States completely and delist themselves on online stores. Speaking of the 8BitDo, I think we also are going to see a story here that they've maybe got some new models in the works that'll have direct Steam input support. As such, the current models may be somewhat old if you do get them on sale, but they probably won't matter too much. Although I can't inherently suggest getting an 8-bit controller still. It's not a bad third-party controller, but I still kind of feel like if you like Xbox controllers, buy official Xbox controllers. If you like Sony Bluetooth controllers, buy the Sony Bluetooth controllers. And then maybe get a dongle if you need a dongle to get those to work with computers or other devices. The Returnal PS5 Pro patch is available now to celebrate the game's 4th anniversary. The patch increases the game's resolution by 2.5 times, according to Housemarque. Man, time certainly has flown. If this game has been out for 4 years, I definitely remember looking at it and reporting on it when it came out. And frankly, yeah, it's probably been over a decade now that it's all just been squashed together into the span of what feels closer to like 4 years. Nintendo Switch's new virtual game card system stops the same game being played online on 2 Switch consoles. Players with different accounts could previously play the same digital Switch game online together. So this new virtual game card system has some caveats, and I imagine that's what we're going to find really as once people really start using the Switch 2 and start diving deep into it, is that there's just going to be little quirks and little caveats here and there to make it less of a good offering, on top of its price being the major factor. Switch 2's Joy-Con's HD rumble won't be as noisy as it was on the Switch, Nintendo says. Which, okay. I don't remember people complaining about it being noisy, but maybe it was. Maybe that's why you didn't really hear a lot of people talking about the HD rumble. Maybe a bunch of games refused to actually embrace the HD rumble. This is perhaps the first screenshot we've seen with the Joy-Cons in an actual human hand. And it still does feel like it is an awkward looking layout, to say the least. The button faces here just still feel like they're in the wrong place. Notice how this thumb is just dangerously close to hitting the analog stick. Notice how you have a very much not cushioned or conformed grip with these 3 fingers here. You aren't wrapping the middle knuckle of the top pointer finger onto the triggers, but instead have your pointer, your furthest knuckle on it. Notice how this hand feels like it's probably a little overstretched to reach this analog stick. It would be kind of squashed, it looks, to hit the buttons. The layout still just looks terrible. Just scaling everything up only is going to help so much. I personally, at some point, may just have to learn to love split controllers in total. The idea of splitting a controller in half is probably not a terrible controller concept, but just for the ergonomics of it, but it may feel a little weird too. Yeah, anything that really changes is going to feel a little weird. Nintendo revamps Switch profile icons with updated designs for Mario, Donkey Kong, and Pikmin. Which, okay, so here you have a less furry version of Donkey Kong that makes him look like he's made out of felt, if anything, and teeth that are showing a little bit more with less gaps in it. And his eyes are wider apart and bigger. And his skin tone is more shadowy and shaded. Where the new version, I assume this is the new version, showing more of a teeth gap, eyes closer together, more hair instead of felt. You can see the ear more in this picture. The skin tone seemingly a little bit better lit and brighter. I can't help but wonder if this is one of those cases where they had an intern work on this project, or some low-level associate, making minute changes for what I don't feel like is much of a reason, because these icons in particular are just not likely even going to be at a higher resolution. Like, I know, if I was to guess, these icons probably are close to like 160 by 160 pixels. Let's even assume that they're 360 by 360 or 640 by 640, which would be really big. You're unlikely to actually ever see them at that resolution. And certainly that's the kind of thing that I don't think too many people are really going to appreciate. And we'd rather see Nintendo work on something else instead of just reanimating icons. Video Game Chronicle says Flappy Bird is back, promising no Web3 or crypto content, despite the team behind it. The game's original creator isn't involved. Yeah, the original creator of Flappy Bird notoriously took it down for being too popular. Also, I think because he was Chinese and there was just this danger, I think, of some kind of political action around him for making an addictive, non-productive game. And then I think at some point he sold it. And there was just this whole middle experience. It feels like Epic Games might actually be involved at some point. Yeah. Flappy Bird is one of those flash in the pan fad games that as a concept got ripped off extremely fastly because it was such a simple concept and such an easy to program concept, and was way too popular for its own good. Had it been available for download all these years and never been removed, then it would just be very much like something like Cut the Rope, or Candy Crush, and that they shouldn't really be remembered or that popular, but probably still are. There almost is a better argument to be made to embrace capitalism in a capitalistic world, in this case instead of removing the game, had he simply updated the game with the ads for more levels or new skins and just put a whole bunch of DLC into it. He could have driven away more people to stop playing the game, which seemed like his goal overall. The Evil Dead game, or Evil Dead the game, is no longer on the Epic Games Store or the PlayStation Store, sparking fears it could be shut down. The game's third anniversary is a fortnight away, as in 2 weeks. Fairly believable. I haven't heard anything about the Evil Dead the game in a long time, and I know the whole rights around Evil Dead and the Army of Darkness movies were always in contention and weird. Although I think a lot of the thought there was that Evil Dead was the way of correcting that situation. Although the main protagonist of the Evil Dead movies is pretty old these days, so maybe he had a hand in it, but I doubt it. And then the new characters for the Evil Dead TV series were supposed to be young replacements for him, and they worked pretty well, but then the TV series kind of ended too. I don't even know if, I assume this is just a character from Evil Dead 2. I kind of highly recommend the TV series though, because it is this unique horror movies if you were going to make a TV series around the concepts of a comedic horror series. That's exactly what you get with the TV series, and it's pretty good. And certainly you just don't see a lot of that anywhere else. Like, if there's one comedic horror movie, it'll just be that one. Maybe you'll get a series of 2 or 3 comedic horror movies, but that's going to be kind of it. So yeah, if anything, I think the TV series around like several of those horror movies that were more comedic make a lot of sense. The actual game, though, I don't think is particularly great. From the looks of it, it definitely looks like something that you would need a group of friends to want to play with you, and that's going to be hard. So we do have that plugin. So let's look and do a little bit of research here on Steam. Evil Dead the game. Game of the Dead. Being the first thing that comes up, and Bayonetta is way down here. So let's take the game part off. Yeah. Ash vs. Evil Dead on Dead by Daylight. Yeah, I'm not seeing an Evil Dead game on Steam at all, so maybe it has just been completely removed. And arguably, maybe it makes more sense to just have Ash as an iconic character, somewhat iconic character, in Dead by Daylight than it does to make, then it makes sense to have a separate game. Noticeably, this is very much in line with the Friday the 13th game being taken down, as far as just the player versus player concept, and combining horror movies just is perhaps not anywhere as good. Apparently there's this Retro Realms DLC, which, yeah, apparently Retro Realms has several characters. Retro Realms Arcade. It's rated very positively, but then it does look like you you're paying an extra $50, so it's like $70 if you wanted all the DLC on it. So yeah, I suspect Evil Dead is missing now. Most games, particularly when you have that online element, don't last much more than 3 years, if they even make it to 3 years. They're just not really designed to work that way. Currently the game is available on Steam and Xbox at the time of writing, and I can't find it on Steam now, so it does look like it has just been removed everywhere. That doesn't inherently mean it won't come back at some point, but it probably won't. When you're paying for servers to run these games, that is always a problem. And inherently, I think there is just kind of this need for games to have single player content in them or not be server based in general, particularly if you want your the art aspect of video games to last. You should make games that are not embracing online or server elements anywhere as much. That being said, I guess it also makes a lot of sense that something like Evil Dead would be just closer to a visual novel or a mobile game than a AA game or an indie game. Heeding none of my advice, Sega's 32-player PC and mobile Sonic Rumble has been delayed. Which, yeah, another game series being pushed towards a always online server-centric experience. PlayStation Plus Essential monthly games for May include a bunch of games. Let's see if we can see a list here. Not an easy list to find out. Let's see, Borderlands 4 gets a 20-minute gameplay deep dive video. Gearbox hosted a special Borderlands focused PlayStation State of Play presentation, which I guess that happened already, since it does look like it's here. Don't worry, we're not gonna sit here for 20 minutes and watch all of this. So this video has people talking over at least the first 7 minutes or so. Some of this feels like they're explaining some basic things you would have already known had you played Borderlands games before. Looks like they've updated their interface, and no longer is the interface a holographic display that is happening in game. Instead, they are having it where the character you're playing as is facing the camera, which has always been a problem with Borderlands, is that the holographic display had you looking at the back of the character. There's a whole better interface where you're not moving through the menu as much, although this does kind of feel like more of a computer monitor style of layout. The gun swapping menu is different. Apparently you have animal pets now that you can switch into different types of damage that they'll do. So it does seem like they're still trying to go with the run and gun element, the jumping, and I do believe we're seeing a character sliding quite a bit here also. it feels like instead of throwing more enemies at you, they're throwing enemies with a little bit more health, which that can get annoying, certainly when you're dumping half of a clip into every single enemy on screen. But that's probably a better optimization method than trying to fill a screen with a whole bunch of tiny one-shot kill enemies. I swear, like, half time I say something, I'm not sure I'm even completing the sentence I started when watching video. It's just really hard to be focused on things while also listening. They're teasing something that crystals are growing out of the characters in the test tube here. So yeah, here they're going to show a big boss battle, which at some point the giant bosses I just think have gotten kind of ridiculous in the Borderlands series, and yeah, if they become just like way too powerful and way too large. Oh, I guess I can say that the voice here being said here is not Randy Pitchford. We can get a picture here of just how many employees Gearbox has, which is looking to be about 200, maybe 150 people. So if Borderlands 4 comes out and we then have a whole bunch of layoffs at Gearbox, we'll know something happening there. So it definitely seems to me like the case here is that the Borderlands 4 either has to succeed or there's going to be some major shakeups, because I just can't see them having less than average success and then 2K or Take-Two, whichever one it is, just being cool with that. And at some level I kind of wonder if it wouldn't have made more sense for the Borderlands series to be handed over to a different company, although at this point I don't know who that different company would even be, since there's been so many layoffs everywhere. But yeah, I just don't feel like there's enough enthusiasm around Borderlands to make a spiritual successor around Borderlands, although you might be able to do something like that. But I just don't think if half of the people working at Gearbox left and formed their own company, too many people would be too enthusiastic around that either. The biggest thing that can happen around Gearbox, since they worked on, I believe, some of the early Half-Life or maybe Counter-Strike code, would be if all of a sudden there was just a Valve in Frisco, Texas. Just Valve decided to open a new office in Frisco, Texas for some reason, and took a bunch of employees from Gearbox and made them part of Valve. That would be interesting, but then it would probably just mean that there would be this constant speculation and assumption that they're working on some kind of new Half-Life game, and they may make something that's very different from what anybody really would want. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Platinum Games is seemingly hiring for another online action game. The studio CEO previously told Video Game Chronicles more live service games were planned despite Babylon Fall flopping, which, yeah, definitely feels like his plans are to go live service and try and make as much money as possible there. Meanwhile, it feels like most, if not all, of the talent, people who actually worked on Bayonetta, have left Platinum Games at this point. Which that's pretty much all I know Platinum Games for is Bayonetta, because I'm not going to really expect them to make any new Wonderful 101 games. And I don't know if I can even name another game that Platinum Games has the rights to. Elden Ring has sold over 30 million copies. From Software says Elden Ring is the best-selling From Software game ever. Which, yeah. As far as I can tell, Elden Ring was a game that came out and was received well amongst people who wanted to play those kinds of games. And I don't think there was ever really any major complaints or controversy around it. I'm not sure that they've added a ton of new content through the DLC, but I know they've added a little. And so it just feels like a good game that was good enough. And thus didn't need anything more. Apparently Far Cry 4 now runs at 60 frames per second on the PS5 following a new update, which an 11-year-old game just now getting the 60 frames per second seems like a minimal amount of progress has happened there. Noticeably too, I don't think it was Far Cry 4, but Far Cry 3 was recently censored. There was a lady who was topless and talking to you, and then she says to the protagonist character, "Are you going to just sit there and stare at my boobs?" And they edited it and censored it, so now she's wearing a top. And she still says the line. So I guess it still applies and works, but it does seem very weird to have a game out for years and then censor it after the fact. Which this has always been a danger around censorship, though, is that you'll have people put things out and go, "Oh, we're not going to censor the game, we're not going to censor it." And then they wait until people aren't looking, and then they censor it anyways. Just for resale reasons, and or just insanity reasons, really. I'm not even sure what the real reason would be. Notably, there is, as far as I know, never been a game that has been decensored after release, or particularly years after release, which, yeah, I guess there's perhaps some games that actually do get decensored patches, but usually that's fairly close to their launches or done by fans if it's done years later. But yeah, the closest I guess you would get would be mods of games, which certainly there are plenty of, I guess, add nudity to a game that never had it in the first place. Mods for like Skyrim and things like that. But that is the bigger story, certainly, as far as I'm concerned, around Far Cry, which I'm not very concerned around Far Cry. Like, I definitely have considered playing the Far Cry series, but because you're playing as a different person every game, it doesn't seem like it has really a consistent narrative, so I don't really need to play all of the games. Maybe just Far Cry 3, and I'm not even sure there's anything new that I could say around Far Cry 3 that hasn't already been said, so maybe it's better just to play different games, smaller games that less people have seen, or newer games that might be more popular, go in one or the other directions. A Minecraft movie is getting a block party edition this week, where fans will be encouraged to make noise. The rowdy behavior of cinema goers has been criticized since the film was originally released. Which, okay. So now the movie theaters, which I think remembered that they were just about to go bankrupt and dying, are going to try and embrace the block party edition. However, frankly, they are moving far too slow if that was going to be the case, that there was going to be ones where you're encouraged to make memes and talk to the screen, and then there were going to be ones where you're encouraged to be silent, which inherently maybe all movies should be like that, there definitely have been some theaters in the past that were very strict and would kick people out if you talk or make noise. And then most movie theaters have been much more lax around that. I put on my personal Facebook a meme I made showing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and let me see if I can remember what I put on it. Moviegoers these days should be more respectful. Moviegoers who are talking to the screen and throwing popcorn should be more respectful like their younger generations. And then the meme part at the bottom, the punchline is, and cross-dress also. The point there, which I think a lot of people are perhaps not thinking of, is that this has certainly happened before, particularly at the Rocky Horror movie showings that still have midnight showings to this day, last I heard, where it very much has become a tradition that you show up at the movie theater cross-dressing like the characters in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and you're throwing popcorn and toilet paper at the screen, and you're saying entire lines that are being said in the movie. Now, the Rocky Horror Picture Show is also a very old movie, so people who really love it probably have it memorized by heart. It's also a singing movie, musical, so singing along is perhaps encouraged, which maybe the Minecraft movie missed that as a concept. Like, particularly since you have Jack Black there, maybe it would have been, well, it certainly would have been a different thing if it was a musical, and kids were just singing along with the songs, which Disney, I think, is also probably dropping the ball there, in that sing-along musical movies showing in the theater might make some sense too. But yeah, the rowdy behavior in the Rocky Horror showing is almost certainly way worse than the chicken jockeying nonsense the Minecraft movie. Someone made an interesting argument that this might be the new norm for the next generation of moviegoers, if there is going to be a next generation of moviegoers, which is a big if, and that they will just expect that they can be rowdy and make memes and film and pull out their cameras in the middle of movie presentations. But I would more assume that kids are going to see a very small number of movies over their youth in general. Just Sonic movies, Mario movies, maybe a Disney movie, but probably not. Minecraft movie once. I imagine a lot of kids are straight up going to see these on streaming services later. That would not actually go into a theater because it's just going to be too expensive. Which certainly would be nice if there was a backup thought as far as what you're going to do with the movie theaters once they all start collapsing. Because giant buildings, lots of air conditioning, giant screens, big speakers. It's kind of hard to refurbish that into much of anything. The fear is they're all going to be turned into like church platforms and presentations like that or something. Would be about the only thing that would be close to that. Let's see. Indiana Jones is selling well on the PS5, but isn't in the top 15 most played games. So selling well, but not amazingly great for the delay. Baldur's Gate 3 director says his studio isn't interested in making DLC because it's boring. Alright, that's an opinion, but more than likely I would suspect they also don't either have the time or the funding to do it or the rights to do it, which I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have the rights to it. Happy player, happy business, but you also need to have a happy developer. My understanding of the Baldur's Gate 3 story, though, also would imply that there's probably not much you could do with DLC, that you would just be adding a new character who would be around throughout the events of the story, and that would be about it. Or you're going to add new events of story, which would take a lot of work. It still does feel like the CEO of Larian Studios is talking perhaps too much. Again, sorry for yawning. Yeah, he seems to like he's taking probably a little too many interviews. CD Projekt Red shares more Cyberpunk Switch 2 footage, says it's the best way to play it on the go, which inherently it's the only way to play it on the go other than playing it on the Switch 1, which you can play Cyberpunk 2077 also on the Steam Deck, I'm pretty sure. Oh, I guess in the warm-up I also could have said I'm still watching Monk, which, man, I think I'm in like season 6, but I might be in season 8. There's definitely some points where Monk is just increasingly becoming an annoying character, and just being too mean to Natalie, being too cheap, underpaying her, even though her parents are hugely rich. It feels like the daughter of Natalie really is getting underpaid as an actress, and so she's not showing up unless absolutely needed, where it felt like she was going to be more of a consistent point. There's a point where his therapist gets replaced with a completely different person, so I feel like there's just a lot of budgets there. In a lot of ways it feels like Monk now has become the prototype of what Psych would be, and definitely is much more comedic, but there's a lack of consistency. Like one episode he gets shot in 2 legs, the next episode he's perfectly healthy and it's never mentioned again. So it becomes really hard to say any of the later Natalie episodes are great, and it's very easy to be nostalgic for the Sharona episodes and the more serious episodes at the beginning, which honestly I don't feel like the Sharona episodes are better than the if you took 3 seasons worth of episodes after Sharona and 3 seasons with Sharona and compared them, you could probably find better episodes after Sharona. But it does just kind of feel also kind of pointless a lot of times, and so a lot of episodes that I am wasting time watching on streaming Amazon Prime Video I'll barely be paying attention to it. I'm just kind of grinding through the series, not really fully focused, which clearly I'm not fully focused right now about video game news either because I'm rambling. Simlink would like to make a Moomins game and write a novel after he retires. I don't know the Moomins. I assume this is not the Moonmen from what is that, Rick and Morty? Which, by the way, I haven't seen a Rick and Morty episode in a long time, just because I don't have cable, and it's kind of hard to catch the newest episodes. Apparently the Moomins are a Finnish children's characters. Which, okay, fine. I don't think he would get very far with that. It's definitely been my experience that these European characters, while they are beloved in their individual countries, are never particularly that great that they transfer over to another country. One exception to that might be Anne of Green Gables, which made its way to Japan and got a nicely animated movie. I believe it was a movie, maybe a TV series, an early anime, and they've made a new version of Anne of Green Gables relatively recently as an anime. But otherwise, you're going back to something like the Brothers Grimm and Rumpelstiltskins and some of those folklore stories before you hit something that has worldwide impact. Dredd, I guess technically, might be an example of Judge Dredd. Might be an example of something that made a big impact too, but only in the fact that it got a couple of movies. And so yeah, I'm just scrolling down here just to make sure we didn't miss any news stories, and manually opening them all. Which means we can now move over to the Gematsu articles, and now let's probably be a bit faster. So Cattle Country launches May 27th. See, when I click the Steam link here without the plugin turned on, it still opens it in a new tab. And then I still need to go back and close this tab. What comes after, coming for the PS4 and 5 and Xbox One and Series on May 9th. It's a side-scrolling adventure game currently available on the Switch and PC. See if we can find the Steam link for that. Which again, this is where my macros will help quite a bit, is if these tabs were already open. Rise of Industry 2 launches June 3rd. It's a sequel to Rise of Industry, I would assume, for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and Steam and Epic Game Store. From the name, I would assume it is some kind of management game, which I'm not sure I really would want to put this on the fault list. My fault list is still got probably close to 8,000 games on it. I'm not making any significant progress there, and as such I don't really even plan on making a lot of progress there for a while. Dokusei Banging Summer Home Edition is now available in the West. Notice how the screenshot here has a rose over the picture, so that implies to me that there's probably some secret characters there you're not supposed to know. This looks like this is a anime visual novel. Apparently it's a remake of, it's the console version of the Dokusei remake. Yeah, we weirdly are getting a decent amount of remakes of visual novels, and I'm not really sure I'm loving that idea. See, I don't think that this one may even be available for Steam. It may be at its a separate launcher. Yeah, it says PC, but there isn't a list link here. This will just take me to a list of PC games. So moving on. Sea of Stars free DLC Throes of the Watchmaker launches May 20th. Over 8 hours of new content. See if there's a Steam link here. Oh, well, this is a nice sprite-based looking RPG game. I'm still very much in the case where I have a hard time ever thinking I would actually play these kinds of games. And I'm still not sure I can. And there's just like not any DLC already listed. So you can make like a new YouTube short off the main game, but can't inherently make a YouTube short right now off the DLC. Kathy Rain 2 Soothsayer launches May 20th. It's a point-and-click adventure game sequel, which I have to point out that if I was smart, I would schedule Kathy Rain 1, which I played relatively recently, and have it air before May 20th. Almost certainly not going to happen. That also being said, I have to caveat that I really did not enjoy Kathy Rain 1. First of all, it's weirdly set kind of in the past, so you're not going to have cell phones as much. And as a point-and-click adventure game, it just didn't really tell you that there was going to be a whole supernatural aspect until you were 5 or 6 hours into what was probably about 9 hours of gameplay in total. So it just doesn't really set the tone, right? If this is how Kathy looks now, that seems fairly different from the way she looks here and the way her sprite looks. I don't feel like Kathy Rain's story was particularly good. Now they released a whole nother remastered version of the first game, but it just seems kind of crazy to inherently try and sell the same game twice instead of giving a free update to it. She's supposed to be somewhat of a detective, but she's really more of a self-appointed detective. And see, the motorcycle that they show, the motorcycle makes you feel like it's close to full throttle, but it really has no writing or gameplay like that. But yeah, they can certainly see that they've changed the whole art style, and they're definitely like different art, different story, showing real contrasts of the original game. So yeah, while I'm wasting time looking at this trailer, it definitely feels to me like you really need to have loved the first game if you were going to play this. You picked up very few items and had very few puzzles. So yeah, it would be a hard sales pitch to make me want to play Kathy Rain 2. And inherently, the game was also just too long. But I also think I've learned at this point, if I don't like the first game in the series, I really have, I don't have enough time in my life to stay loyal to a series and try the second one or the third one in the series. And certainly for a new series, that's definitely the case. Had Kathy Rain come out 2 decades ago and there was 5 Kathy Rain games, then I would assume that there was at least enough success behind it for them to keep making them. Thus, it might have some relevancy amongst the niche audience of point-and-click adventure players. But yeah, there is really more of a LucasArts style, Monkey Island style comedic point and clicks that I'd rather be playing, and both the Blackwell series and the Kathy Rain series have more of a detective seriousness aspect to them that I have a harder time appreciating. Let's see, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate is coming to the PS5 and PS4 on May 20th, and the Xbox Series and Xbox One on June 24th. Now weirdly, if you'd been following this game on Steam, you probably would have gotten that knowledge. So I wonder if it isn't a case where following games somehow gets people like Gamatsu some of their news. I doubt it though, because that would be a really difficult thing to keep up with and follow. Almost certainly I assume Gamatsu, being run by one person, which I believe it is, gets all his news via email press releases more than anything else. Maybe he gets directly contacted every now and then. Let's see, No Rest for the Wicked Early Access The Breach update is now available. Which, yeah, I have certainly heard the phrase No Rest for the Wicked, but I don't recall seeing a game by that name. Sure would be nice if Gamatsu put their links in the same place over time. Maybe I've seen this game. Can see though it is mixed reviewed in the most recent time frame, and perhaps that's because people feel like a year into early access is more than enough. It does seem like we are starting to see some pushback to games just being in early access for ridiculous long amounts of time, when realistically, if you're in early access more than, say, 10 months, you should probably be kicked off of Steam or reevaluate what you're doing. I don't know what kind of retroactive punishment you really can do other than kick them off Steam, though, or something along that lines. Let's see, Hypercharge Unboxed for PS4 and 5 launches May 30th. Let's see if we can find the Steam link. This game. Yep. And it's already rated very positive. Already on my wish list. Let's see. Nova Mikos. I don't know what that is supposed to mean. Opens a second project teaser website featuring artwork by Itaru Hinouruse. It's okay. Guess that's a little bit of information. Anime girls and high fashion school uniform dresses. Let's see, PlayStation Plus's monthly games lineup for May has been announced, with the list being much easier to read here on Komatsu. Ark Survival Ascended, Balatro, and Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. Harvest Moon, The Lost Valley, and Harvest Moon Skytree Village have been delayed to July 3rd. Definitely doesn't look like anything that would be that impressive by the screenshot anyways. Shovel Knight Dig for PS5, Xbox Series, and Xbox One launches May 15th alongside a Wicked Wishes update. Shovel Knight Dig, I believe, is a spin-off game. Was first launched via Steam and Apple Arcade. Of course, I have this weird situation in that I don't think I could ever really play this Shovel Knight game without addressing the fact that I could not finish playing the original Shovel Knight games. It just wasn't good enough to play it or interested enough. Borderlands 4 State of Play gameplay trailer, we already had mostly looked at that. Looks like there's maybe some screenshots here from the trailer. But yeah. I don't know if there's anything too much to take from all of this. Feels like you're going to have some bright colored neon stuff based on the elemental attacks that you're constantly doing. It feels like maybe you're not going to have a siren so much as you're just going to have some other kind of character that's like a siren. Yeah. That may have to do with the story. EO-we-ro or Lo-e-ro. Yeah, it's probably an L. Lo-we-ro announces a visual novel style rhythm game called Falsus for PC. Visual novel style is an interesting description, and apparently doesn't have a Steam link yet. So I'd have to really ask the question as far as what makes something visual novel style. Does it just mean that you're planning on not really animating the images and instead you're just going to have flat 2D images? Which that's what it seems like that is the case. So you have these girls wearing some kind of collars, which typically means they're being controlled by something or someone. Yep. And so perhaps in the rhythm game, as you progress, you're moving the story. Let's see. What I really want to hear, though, is see here is the gameplay mechanic. They're playing the music. So a lot of songs. So the danger of something like this is that you may have a percentage of players who want to move the story forward, but just don't want to have to grind through 110 songs to make any progress there. Whereas I imagine most of your audience is going to be interested more in the music and not interested in the story as much. Let's see, Splitgate 2 open beta test launches May 22nd. Check that out on Steam and see where we are with this. But yeah. I might as well take that one off the fault list and instead put it on my checkbox. Borderlands 4 release date being moved up. We already talked about it. Now the Borderlands series has always had, as far as its cover, a hand with the number of digits that the number of game is on. Which weirdly, in this case, you can see 4 digits and a thumb on this hand, and 3 digits and a thumb being pointed out on this hand. So they seem like they're somewhat breaking out of that stance. Looking at this picture further, you can also see that this guy has been chained up and he's breaking out of the chains, and seems like he's been branded with a Pandora symbol, whether he chose that branding or not. Definitely seems like he's being controlled by some kind of mechanical nature of these masks. So I would suspect that may not actually be the cover art we're seeing. Let's see, a Stealthvania parkour platformer called The Siege in the Sandbox launches May 20th. Let's see that on Steam. I have to fully admit I am a Steam fanboy, which I don't think too many people would really begrudge me that either, though. Trails in the Sky, first chapter Bracer Supply Box Premium Collector's Set has been announced. Yeah, if you're going to be a PC gamer, which you probably need to be a PC gamer if you're going to make content, you're almost certainly going to go through Steam. This is another game too that I can take off the fall list. Taking off anything that doesn't have an actual release date listed yet, or anything that doesn't really interest me. EA laid off hundreds of staff, cancels early stage Titanfall universe extraction shooter. Approximately 100 staff were from Respawn Entertainment. The System Switch update, or the Switch System Update version 20.0.0 is now available. Lost Soul Aside has been delayed to August 29th, which I don't even recall this game. Clearly I've seen it, but yeah, I definitely don't remember it. Fourth, the quintessential quintuplets game for console is going to be announced on May 4th. So the 4th, this game series, anime-based game series, mostly romance visual novel games, I believe. A sound novel Chill With You lo-fi story has been announced for PC. Let's see. Seems like this is the first game that has ripped off that lo-fi and music to chill to, or to study to, that was a big fad on YouTube for a long time. Although it seems like it's been disappeared, probably by the YouTube algorithm, probably by the realization that the lo-fi music they were playing was copyrighted, and it was just blatant copyright infringement that is just has a lo-fi element added to it so that it didn't get content ID'd. Certainly that was a big thing for a while there. Here they've made their own anime girl that looks different than the anime girl that replaced the anime boy in the streams I saw, and I guess the real question would just come down to, will there be really a story here, or will it still just be a nothing game based on a overly simplistic concept? Let's see, the Returnal PS5 Pro Enhanced patch now available. The Two Heart remake has a 6-minute trailer and latest character profiles. This in particular was a game that I really did not appreciate the new visuals to it. Two Heart as a visual novel I think is particularly old, but instead of just having a new 2D animator draw the characters in a newer, more detailed style, they have instead gone with what feels like just some kind of asset flippy, low detailed 3D images of characters, and the initial comparison trailer really made this new art style stand out as just being lacking in detail. Just fewer lines in the hair, fewer shades of colors. Yeah, that seems kind of crazy. I guess this is what Japanese think a American looks like, with a American flag, bathrobe, and blonde hair, and toting a gun. Almost certainly that's a joke. I guess I don't have anything else to say here, so we'll leave it at that. Let's see. Ini and Arte Piazza announced a Tensai game for Switch called Sugoroku style game with Yuji Horii, Muneyuki Kaneshiro. Due out in 2026 in Japan. So, unless I'm really confused, a Tensai game would be like Devil Summoner. Tensai would be my assumption there. Well, I'm gonna want some more details here. As far as what a Tensai game really means and what this game really means. And I'm getting really sleepy here. I'm gonna need to rush or I'm not gonna make it to the end. Let's see, a Metroidvania game called Chronicles of the Wolf launches June 19th. Which I'm always interested in seeing a Metroidvania game. Although, noticeably, I really kind of fail to ever actually play Metroidvania games. Even Castlevania games I already own. Aliens-inspired Metroidvania called Moedra adds a PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch versions. I guess Moedra. That's probably how you pronounce that. I assume we're getting outside of the Golden Week. Or we're just about to the end of the Golden Week in Japan, so we'll start seeing perhaps fewer announcements for games or releases of games from the Japanese companies for a while. An arcade racing game called Formula Legends has been announced for all consoles and PC. But yeah, all consoles now, not including really the Switch 2 at this point. Let's see, Devolver Digital and Pigeons at Play announced a co-op first-person shooter called Mycopunk for PC. Honestly, I don't even know what to really do here. As far as I could stand up and try and shake up, jump around a little bit to try and stay awake, but that really isn't going to work in the long run. Let's see, Bridge Constructor Studios coming to all consoles and PC this summer. I feel like some of the previous Bridge Constructor games are also on sale, or at least they were on sale a couple days ago. But yeah, I tried to play a couple of Bridge Constructor games, but pretty much have failed at this point to make any sense around them or be able to play them. Hyper Dimension Neptunia Rebirth 1 for Switch launches this summer in Asia with English language support, which is to once again point out how some of these Japanese games at this point are not even trying to come to the West and are simply just adding English as a secondary language for people in like Korea and the Philippines, or then they're trying to target the niche audience that may exist in the West. Mostly this is because of censorship pushes, though I'm not sure that there's really anything particularly even lewd in the Neptunia series. Yeah, this is also being released via PlayAsia, not Steam. See, Little Kitty Big City is coming to the PS4 and 5 on May 9th. I feel like we may have talked about that already. So, yeah. Survival horror, first person shooter, Eternal Evil. We talked about that, so I'm going to jump through the rest of these. Because these are old stories we talked about in the previous stream. At least I think we did. Blackjack RPG. Some of these I think I need to double check just to make sure. Just to make sure we did cover them. It may very well be the case that we didn't cover them, and it may also just be the case that I've forgotten about them. Crown Gambit. Duck Detective: The Secret Salami coming to PS5 on May 22nd. Guess at a certain level I do have a desire which I really could never embrace, which would be to sit here in silence as I go through these tabs and just make people read. But yeah, I could never really embrace being that lazy of a content creator. Duck Detective: The Ghost Glamping launches May 22nd for PS5, Xbox One and Series, Switch and PC. I assume this is a sequel to The Secret Salami. Odd Sparks: The Automation Adventure launches May 27th. See if we can get a better idea of what that is. It's in early access, and it's been in early access for a while. Probably not a game I'd actually play though. Rah Rah Boom launches this summer for PS5 and 4 and Xbox One and Series and PC. Again, we'll take things off the fall list if it doesn't have an actual launch date. Okay. So, I think we probably talked about this. Crowdfunding campaign for a Shibuya live action adventure game. That's interesting. Interesting to see a Japanese developer even try and crowdfund. Maybe we'll see more of that. A free-to-play MMO action RPG called Crystal of Atlan launches May 28th for PS5, PC, iOS, and Android worldwide. A very muscly guy here, shirtless guy, being shown. Yeah. I imagine this isn't going to be much of anything, and I don't think it's actually going to be on Steam. The looks of it, it's going to be Epic Game Store for a while at least. Let's see, Furu Iki 5 seconds trailer, or is it Furuki 5 second trailer? This is the travel game where it likely won't come outside of Japan, because the idea of a game where you're traveling and seeing live action real photos of locations in Japan, it's just going to make less sense to a foreigner. Barlet has an opening movie now. This is that school RPG Persona-like game. Let's see, the Fantasy Life I, the girl who steals time, has got lots of press releases coming out around it and still not catching my attention. So yeah, in a previous stream I was wondering why my macro is opening up like links to the Switch or links to the Xbox, and it wasn't until setting up for today that I realized when I right click like this, it is highlighting the Switch and the Xbox. And so it wasn't my macro that opened up the tabs, it was me who opened up the tabs just using the box selection tool extension I have installed. Of course, that's not really useful information to anyone but myself, but it's nice to know I'm learning a little bit every day. Elden Ring shipments and digital sales top 30 million. So, yeah. A Steam update, this is our first Gaming on Linux article, is bringing DLC fixes, while the Steam Deck itself, Steam update for desktop client, I guess the Steam client in general, but then if you update the Steam client on the desktop mode version of the Steam Deck, you're still getting that update, or if you even update your Steam Deck, you're likely getting an update to the Steam client. So the Steam client is kind of everywhere on anything using Steam. Let's see. So for the Steam Deck specifically, they fixed installed DLC not being recognized by some games. They fixed up a startup failure causing Steam to get stuck displaying installing verifying screen when runtime files fails to unpack. It fixed a bug that prevented BIOS updates when applying via settings system on the Steam Deck OLED. And for the desktop mode, they did the same fix of DLC not being recognized, or a similar fix. They fixed the Steam client window not setting a maximized state correctly at startup. They've disabled spell checking suggestions for CD key input fields, which, yeah, you really wouldn't need that. They've increased the timeout before Steam will consider a Steam web helper process unresponsive to reduce spurious failures when launch time is longer than expected. And yeah, they fix a crash initializing Steam overlay in macOS when using Parallels, which, yeah. So those are more meat and potato style updates. Nothing particularly too interesting. Multiple Star Wars classic games joined the Good Old Games Preservation program with a big sale. I think we had talked about that. And I think we may find that most of what is open here we've already talked about. Metal platformer Voivod and Nuclear Warrior is now on Kickstarter and smashing the funding goal, which I guess is good for it. A retro Disney themed shooter called Mouse PI for Hire looks awesome in this latest trailer. Let's see if we see that on Steam. I think we've already shown it off. But the problem though is that there's been several games that kind of look like this on Steam, but then are really just garbage. The hope is this is not going to be one of them. There are several games, probably dozens if not hundreds, also that I've seen that have caught my attention in the past and just disappeared completely, which that is in itself kind of a shame. So I really am getting to the point where sometimes I see a game and it reminds me of another game that was announced that never came out, that then maybe reminds me of a game that actually did come out decades previous. A Star Fox X 3D shooter called X Zodiac gets a major update with a new level, but it seems like weird to just add a single new level, even if it is fairly large. Yeah, this definitely feels somewhat like a Star Fox game. Of course, they're comparing it to the original Star Fox, not Star Fox 64 per se. Withering Waves arrives on Steam, another with anti-cheat problems on the Steam Deck and desktop Linux. Apparently they are working to get it to be compatible on the Steam Deck, which does seem like the kind of game that would make a lot of sense if it was compatible on the Steam Deck. This is a single player in-app purchase game, though. Free to play. While it looks pretty and all, I don't think I really want to play something that is just gonna try and monetize you, which almost certainly it is, because you don't have in-app purchases if you're just gonna sell DLC. So for the sake of my wish list, I'm gonna take that off, because my wish list is gonna get really big too, way too big. See, Pass Fortress turns TF2 into a competitive basketball-like, and it's coming to Steam. I think we've already talked about this. Nope, don't recognize it. World of Goo 2 is out now for Steam and Good Old Games, saying it's a great pick for puzzle game fans. I question if it really is even a puzzle game though, as much as it is a physics game. But clearly there is an audience here that's very positive around it. Yeah, I don't think I'm actually going to play it, so let's leave it like that. Proton 10 gets a first beta to improve game compatibility on the Steam Deck and desktop Linux. So Proton 10 would be the next major stable version of Proton once it's out of beta state. Let's see, it moves Proton over to the latest Wine 10 release. So it's going to be based off of Wine and then with some extra improvements for gaming. And it's going to bring updated DirectX Vulkan and Vulkan Direct 3D Proton layers to translate Windows programs API calls into Linux API calls. Steamworks SDK 1.62 support. Update to Xalia to get gamepad support for more launchers. Lots of fixes for specific games. I'm not sure what Xalia really is. Yeah, you can see there's a list here of several games. Interesting, Agony Unrated being one of them, and Galgun 2 being one of them. Let's go back through this list again and see if there are any other games that have high levels of nudity or lewdness to them. Well, the Zero Escape Nunnery games don't really have nudity, and maybe have a little bit of lewd jokes, but not that much. But yeah, when you're getting down to like Galgun 2, you are getting to like smaller games, not just the biggest sellers, the AAA games. And so there is a question certainly as to what convinces Valve employees to work on Proton or certain aspects of Proton, and I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't some kind of internal issue tracker that is getting reported to them, but they are mostly still doing everything in secret, not really trying to convince a lot of people to submit issues. Sometimes I'll see games like Max of the Curse of Brotherhood and think maybe I was the only person who even tried to play that on the Steam Deck. I'm pretty sure I did try to install and play that on the Steam Deck, and maybe the Steam Deck just automatically sends back that information, and that's where they get their ideas. I mean, I swear there are times where I'll watch something on Prime Video or Netflix, and the algorithm of the next things they're suggesting seem to be directly connected to things I just watched in my own history, because you'll have like two movies that are connected when there's just no reason why they would be connected, other than I happen to watch one completely different movie than another back to back. I imagine that is also because I play more, or I watch more niche video, or maybe the algorithm is specifically built around each individual viewer, so you get different recommendations based on your own viewing history way more than over a consensus of recommendations amongst many people's viewing history. Let's see, gaming on Linux. Here, this may be actually page 2. But I had this opened up just to see if we'd missed any stories, and we probably have missed some stories, frankly. Now, this is an online multiplayer page of online multiplayer games. Let's see. Sonic Rumble from Sega gets indefinitely delayed to add more features, according to Gaming on Linux. Yeah, the 8BitDo Ultimate 2 is getting full Steam input support for more buttons. One of the gripes with the original 8BitDo Ultimate 2.4G controller is that the Steam input cannot see the additional buttons on the back, but it seems like the latest firmware updates the Ultimate 2 to solve that problem. Which, yeah. In contrast to that, it's also worth reminding people that they have at least temporarily stopped shipping 8BitDos to the United States. So yeah, with back buttons and with things potentially being on sale, might very well be the best time ever to get a 8BitDo. Unfortunately, once again, I'm going to take a brief bathroom break, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Again, sorry about that. That break took longer than I thought. It turned from a short break to a long break. So yeah, maybe now is the time to buy the 8BitDo Ultimate, although also maybe the 8BitDo Ultimate is really expensive. And UI support is planned but not ready to ship yet. Next Gaming on Linux article EA cancels multiple projects from Apex and Titanfall. Developer Respawn with more layoffs. Yeah. I have to turn my fan down. It's adding to the coldness in my room, and it's gonna make me ill if I don't do anything. EA also in a anti-gamer, or in a negative action, I guess is probably the better way to phrase that, says EA has rebranded and refreshed their anti-cheat into EA Javelin Anti-Cheat. It still blocks Linux and the Steam Deck, which that is the part that would be anti-consumer and anti-gamer, but them laying off people is really just a jerk move. 2 Point Museum gets a big free content update with a new large UI scaling setting for the Steam Deck, which, yeah, inherently that is something that may be needed for a lot of Steam Deck games, although a bigger UI element on the Steam Deck screen is just part of the problem. Lots of games need bigger UI elements just in general. Again, I look at monitors that are 8 feet away from me and they're big TVs, but reading text can be kind of hard, and that's why I have a whole magnifying setup here to bring up a magnifier. Because, like, if I'm a little bit askew from looking directly onto the screen, if I'm just having a bad eyesight day, it can be tough to make out the words, although I mostly can make it out. The Crypts for eSims for Gaza bundle on itch.io has a lot of games, tabletop role-playing games and more. This is a very long title. Crypts, as in, do you mean the Bloods versus the Crips? I'm not sure. And then eSims for Gaza. I assume the for Gaza part is probably the biggest element there. So yeah, you're getting into definitely picking a political side here for this itch.io bundle, which I don't believe would give you actually Steam keys. So yeah, may not interest you because of that reason too. Let's see. Infinity Nikkei on Steam works on Steam Deck, but the situation is odd and anti-cheat blocks desktop Linux. Interesting. And I think we've covered the rest of these stories already. These are new releases, stories. Combo Light is a unique physics-based deck builder where you build up combos to keep hitting a rock. Interesting. Not sure particularly that interesting now. Yeah, I'm not sure there's something here I really care about. Nexus Mods app adds Cyberpunk 2077 as a supported game and improves Stardew Valley modding. Nexus Mod as an app may stand out as something you might want to play around with if you want to mod your games, whereas most of these launcher style apps tend to not be particularly great. I had to update my preferences with Fanatical. They were sending me just way too many emails, and frankly I'm at this point now where Google doesn't want to give you any more free space for email, so I need to go back and remove all of the fanatical emails and all the mostly advertisement emails I get, such as Publishers Clearinghouse and things like that, where although the thing that really screwed people over, and me included, was when they combined things like your Google Drive and your Google Photos storage space into Gmail. Otherwise your Gmail would never really fill up. You'd have to have nearly 1 million emails before you start to really run into problems. But you could certainly have 1 million old emails. But yeah, Fanatical does give you Steam keys if you wanted to buy this bundle. Although there's a decent chance you're going to own several, if not most, of these games already. Let's see. I think that may be close to being done. EA and Codemasters are no longer making World Rally Championship or any other rally games. Interesting. So what is Codemasters doing at this point? Maybe nothing. Maybe they are a big part of the layoffs that are happening there. You point and click urban thriller Kathy Rain Soothsayer launches May 20th. Yeah, we already had looked at this. That's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com news, which we're probably only going to have a couple of articles at most to talk about. The Journey developer, that game company, is going to co-host a game jam. We'd already talked about that. Roblox and Discord have been sued for facilitating the sexual exploitation of a minor, which this has probably happened before and will probably happen again, and at some point this is part of a bigger push around the world where governments are going to try and force increased liability onto websites to then enforce increased age gating, which nothing really wrong with that in my opinion, as long as the age gating doesn't require you to release private information, which unfortunately that is the way it's going, is that increasingly you're going to be asked to scan a photo of your driver's license or something that is more private information. Particularly in the United States, there is room for a different way of proving age, I think. Perhaps a separate age identification card that you can apply and get. But yeah, we really don't have anything like that. And the people in the United States don't have a national ID card. We have driver's license and passports, but you don't have to own either one of those. And we had already talked about Russia trying to seize the assets from Lesta Studios, former War Gaming subsidiary. The question really is going to come down to, does Lesta Studio really even have any assets for them to grab? War Gaming cut ties with Russia in 2022. Yeah. Let's see, and then we've covered it several times that EA laid off hundreds of workers after canceling games at Respawn. Somewhere between 300 and 400 employees. Which I guess if you had some money now, you would potentially start a new company and hire on some of those employees. There's a quote here: "We are frustrated," which is perhaps the wrong thing to say as a union worker, but probably accurate and true. ZeniMax union workers continue to pressure Microsoft over contract negotiations. ZeniMax Workers United-CWA members have once again called out Microsoft, with the threat of strike action looming large. Now, weirdly, it says no strike with a line through it, so it's like no strike. And then what is it? It says Microsoft 2 years, and we're still. Let's see if we can get one of these. Waiting. Fighting. So yeah. 2 years and they're still fighting. Still trying to negotiate with Microsoft, who, like most big companies, is very much anti-union. So here you can see a relatively decent number of employees, because let's face it, most offices are fairly small as far as video game companies, even if you're talking ZeniMax. And you have one on crutches and one guy wearing a mask, and just a lot of fairly young looking people, which is kind of nice to see that, but it is also an indication on just the hiring practices of video game companies, is that if you're old, you've probably been there a while. And yeah, I guess we could play a game of demographics here if we wanted to, and it looks like there's a decent number of female people, maybe not really approaching 50%, but maybe 40%, assuming all of the female presenting people are actually employees and not just the wives and girlfriends. But then if we want to play the minority game of demographics and exclude women from being considered a minority and exclude old people, that's about the oldest guy, as far as people who look like they are of African descent or Central American, South American descent, or Asian descent. I'm seeing 0 people in that case, which is perhaps yet another example of where a union might help and might hurt. But yeah, one of the things about unionization, once they fully get integrated and somewhat successful in a business, is that it all of a sudden becomes a lot less cronyism when hiring, and it's a lot more, you've got to make paperwork and prove to people why you're hiring certain people, and not just because you like them or they look like you, although statistically it is 100%, seems to be 100% true that the more you look like, or the more you feel like the person hiring you or the CEO of the company, the higher the chances of you getting hired. Terrible sign, though. Really, really terrible sign. They're all wearing red shirts, but, or a lot of them are at least. I don't even think they're all wearing the same union shirts as much as they were just all asked to wear red. This guy's wearing like a Dragon Ball shirt, not red. So as far as the whole organization and solidarity here, they've kind of dropped the ball on not all wearing the same color. But yeah, I guess we can leave it at that. Microsoft is going to drag their feet for as long as they legally can, or as long as they can get away with it, really, before they'd actually recognize a union or actually start negotiating in good faith, if they ever start negotiating in good faith. Then we go from we are tired to it was really wearing people down, funding challenges that followed the runaway success of Another Crab's Treasure. I guess this is more of a interview editorial type article. That's going to bring us to all the new games on Steam, and in this case, I suspect what we may find is that there is actually going to be a decent amount of games here that we don't really need to cover. Went back, I guess, to the 28th. We may find nothing particularly interesting. Now there's some weirdness happening here in that the number of things being shown here has been expanded. I wonder if that is because of me adding the checkbox, or if that is just because of it loading weirdly. But that's not really going to be my focus at the moment. My real focus at the moment is going to just be about closing all of these tabs, as many as possible. And see, some of these like old school looking games, I just don't think I could ever actually care about them, or think anybody does care about them, and that almost certainly is a bias on my part. But yeah, I really just question whether anybody would care about an old school looking game that also plays like an old school game. You could perhaps make a game that played like an old school game but had new graphics and catch people's attention, or a game that had old graphics but played like a new game and grab some people's attention. But yeah, I think gamers in general want an improvement on at least one aspect. Otherwise they would just go back and play already existing, more relevant games, old games. See, this might still be the point where we run into problems, is that there may still always be, even through my new macros, a decent number of tabs that will get put to sleep. Because they will get put to sleep, they will end up having to be reloaded. That may very well just be the way it has to go too, because obviously we're seeing a level of crashiness here. That's probably because of settings I've changed. I also have this weirdness when I'm walking away from my computer and then coming back to it, in that sometimes things just look different, like the computer rebooted, and yeah, I don't really have a great way of knowing if it did or not. Which, yeah, that was one of the things PewDiePie in his Linux video showed off, is that he had some widgets showing like the uptime on Linux, but I don't really know how to pull up the uptime on Linux without looking it up. There's another thing that I think also is concerning me as I get older, is that increasingly I can no longer keep things in my brain, and instead of like learning JavaScript when I need to learn JavaScript, or learning a command when I need to learn it, I'll just Google it and then learn that I can Google it, and that'll be it as far as the whole process is that I'll just come back and Google it. So yeah, if we get to a point where the internet is no longer as good as it is even now, I'm probably going to be in real trouble. Yeah, we have multiple crashes here. We have a decent amount of videos to go through. Some of this is catch up, but most of this is not catch up. It's just a massive amount of games that come out. I could be fairly cruel and start like picking on card battler games, for instance, and just automatically close those without even looking at them, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to do. Yeah, every time I stream, I'm putting dozens, if not 100 games back on the follow list, and I'm definitely not taking 100 games off the follow list every 3 days, which that would be one thing. I guess I could do is maybe try and take a day off and just focus on maybe making some game footage, maybe clearing up the follow list some more. Yeah, I could see maybe doing that tomorrow instead of just diving back in and trying to work on these macros. Of course, the longer it takes me to get the macros working, the more often I'm going to end up just having to manually open all these tabs. Which that probably takes longer. Both processes, though, take kind of a long amount of time. That's why every second of optimization that I can find feels like something I should try and go for, as long as I'm not overcomplicating the code and the process. Let's see. Dating sim game. I think that's gonna be a no. You know what's really crazy is I still have yet to figure out a single pattern as far as which of my YouTube shorts are successful, which of them aren't. Though it kind of doesn't even matter what the pattern is, because that would mean curating which YouTube shorts to make, but yeah, it does seem, from the abstract and not paying much attention to it, very random. Just some succeed surprisingly well, get hundreds of views, where the vast majority seem to get no views. Yeah. One of the things I thought about when I was working on adding the, this looks like an adult game if I was to guess, or at least the lewd game. Yeah, when I was starting to work on adding text-to-speech to the YouTube Shorts, was I could take the audio and put it in one specific channel. So music in the background on like the left side, and then text in the background on the right side. Probably wouldn't want to do that, though. Could maybe put the music in both sides, background music, and then put the speech on the left side or the right side. Probably the right side, since more people are likely to be right-eared and listen to the right headphone if they're only listening to one. So yeah, that is a possibility. It's a slight change of just how you would use FFmpeg to mix the audio together. And by doing that, that means you can watch the shorts and either hear or not hear the text to speech. But on the other hand, that probably doesn't matter. Are we anywhere close to being done? Probably are, but then once again, very sleepy, and I would like to kind of skip the follows cleanup, but I'll try not to do that. Seeing those demon characters, that reminds me, I'm not sure I mentioned this, it's not video game related, but Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel gotten major funding from Amazon Prime Video, and so there's now 4 seasons that have been, I guess, greenlit, and I guess they could probably cancel that at any point if they wanted to for Has Been Hotel, which I think they probably need 4 seasons just to have the whole story finish and make sense and feel good. And then Hell of a Boss was kind of from the same animator creator as Has Been Hotel, but was newer and taking longer to be made. So by getting an infusion of support and money, the thought, I believe, is that it'll be finished in a much more reasonable amount of time. And yeah, the episodes are going to air first for Hell of a Boss on Amazon Prime Video, but then be released on YouTube, and I imagine the same is true for the new episodes of Has Been Hotel, which I guess they're all new effectively because everything from Has Been Hotel that was before is kind of this now non-canonical prequel pass of the idea and story, or more like a pilot episode more than anything. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed Has Been Hotel Season 1. I even wanted to go back and watch it a second time, and then only got maybe one episode through it. But inherently, I guess I was watching it back to back, and that was kind of dumb. Again, I wonder if maybe me watching it one time all the way through plus some extra change helped it get promoted by Amazon Prime Video. Probably not. Though if I was to guess, I bet a lot of people did that of the fandom who's even heard of the show. And it's not like Amazon Prime Video has anything else really. They're repackaging some of the car guys from previously called Top Gear, but Grand Tour is what the Amazon Prime series was called, now that they've all kind of retired, or at least Jeremy Clarkson has retired from being part of that show. Yeah, they're spending the big budget on Wheel of Time content, licensing some weirder stuff. The Bondsman is a new show I want to watch. Also, close to being done, I would hope. I think we're close to being done. So yeah, there's a lot of actually video I've put on the back burner just to watch Monk, which, yeah, maybe it would make more sense to jump around a little bit more and have some more variety. Really embrace that old school way of thinking, in that you would watch TV 3 or 4 shows a week at minimum. Shareware. We haven't seen anything labeled shareware in a very long time. The entire concept kind of falls apart. You're talking digital downloads. The idea of shareware was that you were supposed to share it with your friends, the demo, the episode 1 of a game. Actually hand a floppy disk to your friends. But yeah, it's funny how many new limitations are on that same kind of concept of sharing a game with the friends nowadays, with the Switch virtual game codes, compared to the old days of here's a CD, here's a floppy, I've copied this CD, I've copied this floppy disk drive. Come on. I'm gonna go quiet here. I've run out of things to say. And I don't really know how to cover from this scenario. We've just completely run out of things to say. I've been slowly working on remodeling my hallway, and I've got some cheap shelves to put up, but it really needs to be plastered and painted first. But yeah, I just don't think I'm going to get around to doing that, or affording it. It might be another reason. So I think I'm just going to kind of half-ass it, put the shelves up, and then know where they go when I have to take them down at some point in the future. Right. Yeah. Also, if I'm going to continue down the path of covering news, I really need some new of these interstitial things. I need to make at least 2 new of them. Let's quickly go through all of the news. This is a way of trying to force ourselves to look at games that are already on the fall list and see if that leads to any decisions that can be made, which in many cases it won't lead to any decisions that can be made. In some cases it might. Yeah, things that are in early access. Let's see, here we have one that's already mixed review wise, so I'm gonna just get rid of it. Yeah, most things that are in early access are going to be left on the follow list. Rhythm game. It's not really my type of game though. So I'm gonna take that one off. Again, I don't think that's really a game I want to play. So yeah, I'm moving things to the checkbox instead of leaving them on the follow list. This looks good. Does this have in-app purchases? Yes, it does. That's gonna make it a no. It's very positive. Puzzle horror game. Go ahead and put that on the wish list. Sniper Elite. Resistance. Yeah, that's good enough to put it on the wish list, I guess. Some of these notifications are going to be redundant, and some of these are going to definitely be games we've already seen. This is a multiplayer focused game, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Hyper Light Breaker. In early access, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that too. Yeah, I think tomorrow should be just an extra day to take off. Probably should do that more often. Not that I really recoup from anything. I could take 10 years off and I'd not be energized by it. Could take a whole lifetime off and still probably not be energized by it. Multiplayer game, survival game. That's what it says it is. A multiplayer game. Roguelike beat 'em up. Interesting. Pokemon Quest. It's a Pokemon clone game. Which I'm surprised we don't have more of those types of games. Oh man, this is really draining me. This feels too much like a party game. But I'll put it on the wish list anyways. Yeah, I guess the thing I would really like to be able to do is to automate all of this just to be read text-to-speech, which I suppose there might be a way to do that. I could run the program to follow the clipboard, maybe copy things to the clipboard like crazy. That might work. Just copy the text and then have a program constantly looking to see if the text changes in the clipboard, and if it does, have a text-to-speech function kick in. Could be kind of cool. Of course, I'd be talking over it quite a bit, so it doesn't feel like that would be, it'd make sense to have that going all the time. It'd very much have to be a case of only at the very end. Frankly, usually I have more to say, even at this point, than I do today. Yeah, it's nearly 2 in the morning for me, and I tried to go to sleep. I would have started at like 4 or 5 in the morning to stream today. But yeah, if the time's lined up and and the algorithm really wants me to stream in the morning, unfortunately I can't really stick with like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday scheme at that point, because on Monday morning there will just never be enough news, and unless you had stuff left over from the previous Friday. And on Friday morning there would be not all the news, so there might be a whole bunch of announcements that would be missed. Okay, well, that was all of the Flawless cleanup, with very poor and limited commentary on the Flawless games. Alright, well, we did manage somehow, even with 2 bathroom breaks, to only go 3 hours and 31 minutes, so maybe that is just a indicator that there was less news today, and maybe it's going to be less news going forward. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.